From the Chicago Sun-Times newsroom, I'm Natasha Korecki, and this is Off Message, our weekly political news show. Joining me this week is City Hall reporter Fran Spielman, editorial writer Kate Grossman, and our watchdog reporter and early and often columnist Dan Mihalopoulos. So this week, Rahm Emanuel has come up with what he says is going to be a solution to his huge pension problem.
I'll tell you what a cut looks like. Not getting a retirement check. That's a cut. This guarantees you have a pension.
How is he going to solve that?
Remember, this is only for two of the funds, municipal and laborers. He wants to raise property taxes by $250 million over 5 years, cut benefits by 29% to the workers, have them forfeit their cost of living increases.
This is a draconian cut. We think this amounts to balancing the city's budgets on the backs of some of the poorest people who are in the city who are least able to afford.
And the bottom line here is, two other funds, police and fire, are still out there. There's a $600 million payment that the city is obligated to make next year by state law to shore up police and fire pensions. So the question is, if he's hitting the property tax this hard for two funds, what does he do for police and fire?
What is the likelihood that the General Assembly is going to approve this kind of tax increase?
It's pretty questionable, mostly because the Republicans have all lined up against it for a variety of reasons, most of which are strictly political. They have this conspiracy theory that because Governor Pat Quinn is proposing a property tax rebate and Emanuel is proposing a property tax hike, that Springfield is now going to be paying for Chicago's pension problems. The numbers, first of all, don't add up because the pension rebate isn't nearly enough to cover what the property tax is going to be. They have some legitimate concerns, I'm not dismissing them, but they're all lining up against it, which makes it very hard for the Democrats all to be the only votes on it, especially since a lot of Chicago legislators are just naturally opposed because they don't want to hurt, city workers.
Well, I thought it was interesting that Madigan initially said it was going to be called for a vote, and then he withdrew that. Then he later added an amendment to it saying that he would give the city council the option of...
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Speaker.
of adding the property tax to protect his members, right? So
right,
what
he
does
wants
that do?
the aldermen to wear the jacket. The aldermen are facing re-election in less than a year. You think they're looking to walk the plank with Emanuel? I mean, this is a very, very tough vote for an alderman.
So is Rahm being more brave in this sense politically?
Well, I think that his hand is forced. This is a situation where Rahm has inherited something again from Rich Daley, and I think it should start a whole bigger debate about property taxes in the city of Chicago. There have been some huge increases in values in parts of the city, so I think the increase could be more than what the average being thrown out there is. And really, when you look at it, I think the dirty little secret is, as high as people in Chicago think their property taxes are, they're not that high relative to other areas that have much better funded school systems and much better funded services.
I don't think there's any question that the city that does, though, need a new source of revenue. There's no way that Rahm can go back to the property tax after hitting it this hard. He needs a casino, he needs a Rahm tax, a sales tax on services, he needs a graduated income tax, he needs some pot of gold from someplace.
Well, that's why some people think that this whole property tax being thrown out there and now stalling is just a preface for another push for a casino, another push for this other. In fact, Cook County Commissioner John Fritchie, who spent quite a few years down in Springfield before he came back home to be on the county board, tweeted that very same sentiment today, that he thinks that everyone's just being primed for yet another push for a land-based casino in the city of Chicago, because Lord knows that will generate the money that will solve everyone's problems.
The casino legislation went nowhere last year.
Or any year for 20 years.
We hear about it every year, right? I mean,
right.
And Rahm, overall, how successful has he been in pushing his agenda in Springfield?
He was pretty successful in the very first months, but since then, no. Earlier this week was a classic example where he was entertaining Obama and presiding over a city council meeting. Maybe he didn't even have the time to get on the horn to legislators who he needed their vote.
Well, his office says that he interrupted his meeting with Obama to get back on the phone and work the legislator.
Okay.
So
they better say that.
But yeah, I just want to make one other point. This thing about who's going to wear the jacket for the property tax increase. So they've taken out this provision that says Chicago has to raise property taxes, but in there still is, if Chicago doesn't, then the state comptroller can withhold money that the state disperses to the city of Chicago. So it will compel the city council to raise property taxes, and then city council aldermen can say the
can I
state
do?
forced us. So and this is one of the Republican concerns, which I think is legitimate. They say it's Chicago's problem. Chicago should own it and vote on their own, not forced by the state to raise the property
But
tax.
does the city council want to own it the year
No,
before an
of course
election? I mean, the
not.
election is less than a year away. I think that this is one big issue that they never want to take on. They never have really taken it on, and that's why we're in the situation that everyone is in now. Property tax, I don't see how that can't be part of it.
Let's switch over to another story that came out of City Hall this week, which was the strip club ordinance that Waguespack withdrew his support for his own bill, and he said, quote, "It came out differently than I intended it."
Well, I was for it
yeah.
before I was against it.
You didn't read it closely enough.
So what happened?
Well, I think what happened was the alderman had a problem in his ward with places, bars that set up a pole at midnight and tried to get some girls in to draw more audience. And in the process, the mayor's office needed to correct the law. And the law then would open the door for some places to serve booze and also have topless dancers, which they can't do now. So you had those two divergent interests, and you had an Alderman Waguespack who did not read the ordinance that finally came down from the law department, and lo and behold, it did something he didn't want it to do,
Which was?
which was to be more lenient.
I think Waguespack tried to do something good, and then he looked like he had egg on his face because clearly he hadn't read his own ordinance, and he meant to basically crack down, and now he's opened the door for topless women in his ward, which is clearly
Ed Burke of
not
all
what he
people.
wanted.
Did you notice the irony? Ed Burke, of all people, who had the Burke's Law, which had outlawed this years ago, is now the guy saying, well, a world-class city like this should have these kinds of places as long as they don't interfere with the neighbors.
Yeah, I felt like we should open up a discussion about what it means to be a world-class city.
I don't think world-class means topless.
It's not the first time we've seen Ed Burke on various sides of
Yes.
issues, and maybe next year in his disclosure form, we'll find some client of his law firm that had an interest on one side or the other of the proverbial pole there.
Well, with that, let's go to the quote of the week, and you sort of stole mine, which was from Alderman Bob Fioretti when he said, "We need world-class adult entertainment. But the truth of the matter is we have an underlying social problem." And he then talked about prostitution, sex trafficking, and how Chicago could sometimes be ground zero for that because of our location. So,
Okay, mine is, this is what happens when you lock a lot of propeller heads in a room for a short period of time. This is Rahm Emanuel talking about the super transit agency that Patrick Fitzgerald's group came up with and wants to do away with CTA Metro Pace boards and put it all into one super agency. He doesn't like that idea.
propeller heads.
Nerds, I guess, is what he means.
Mine is about the Supreme Court rule this week. They struck down a ban on total contributions that individuals can make to federal candidates. There's a group called the Sunlight Foundation, and they said, once again, the Supreme Court has given more power to special interests and a tiny percentage of the very rich.
And the county GOP chairman, Aaron Delmar, among the many nasty things that he texted to his ex-wife was that he hoped that her significant other would get pancreatic cancer.
Okay, well, with that, thank you very much to our panel, and join us again next week for Off Message.